The gunshot cracked across the pasture and echoed off the walnut trees like thunder trapped in a bottle. Darla Maddox, blonde bob, HOA badge, hard eyes, stumbled backward in the dust between my barn and the old windmill. She had crossed my fence with 2 men, pointed a metal rod at my wife, and screamed that she'd clear us out if we didn't take down our gate. I aimed center mass and dragged the barrel down at the last second. The bullet ripped into the dirt, skipped, and clipped her calf. She crumpled with a gasp, grabbing her leg, shock wiping the grin off her face. Her phone lit the second she hit the ground. 911, she cried, breath jerking. I've been shot. He's crazy. He shot an HOA member on her official duties. For a heartbeat, everything froze. Cows staring, my daughter's bicycle tipped over, the air tasting like metal and dust and hot July. Then sounds slammed back. My wife yelling my name, geese exploding off the pond, Darla's 2 men shouting, "You're done, farmer. You're done." Somewhere beyond the trees, a siren lit up, small at first, then growing. Arlo, our old hound, pressed against my leg and trembled like a leaf. I stood there with the rifle heavy in my hands, and my mind did what a mind does in a storm. It reached for something simple and bright to hold on to. "No one dies on my land," I said out loud, to myself and to the sky and to whoever was listening. I lowered the rifle to the dirt. I took a breath. Then I ran to Darla. Blood had soaked her white capri pants. Not a fountain, but more than a scratch. Her face went from fury to fear in 2 blinks. "Don't touch me," she hissed, and then, smaller, "It hurts." Her voice shook the way a porch screen shakes when a summer storm finds the right note. She was the woman who had sent letters that felt like knives and fines that felt like traps. But right now she was just a person on the ground, bleeding and scared. "I'm going to help," I said. I talked calm like I talked to a skittish colt. "You're going to be okay." I yanked my bandana off, tore it in half, and tied it above the wound. Snug but not cruel. "Breathe with me," I said. "In, out. You're not alone." The men who came with her, gray polo, red ball cap, kept barking threats, but they didn't step closer. Maybe it was the way I said it. Maybe it was the blood. Maybe it was the siren getting louder. I don't know. "Why'd you shoot me?" Darla panted, teeth clenched. "Because you threatened my family and crossed a fence you had no right to cross," I answered, steady but soft. "Because I meant to stop you, not to kill you. Because I warned you. Because I'm done letting people scare my kids for a rulebook they never voted on." She looked at me like I'd spoken another language. Then she looked past me at my wife, Emily, who stood near the porch with our daughter, Grace, behind her. Emily held her phone in one hand and my heart in the other, the way she has for years. She had already called the sheriff. I could see it in her eyes. "We have lived long enough out here to know when to call for help. Now I will tell you how we got here, because stories don't begin with thunder. They begin with the quiet before it. I'm Jake Carter, and this is my farm just outside of Hawthorne Ridge, USA. We raise beef cattle and hay, and we try to raise our kids with good hands and steady eyes. We bought this place 10 years ago when it was a patchwork of tired pastures and sagging fences. The first winter, the wind came under the doors like it had a key. We learned to fix things and to ask for help, which is a kind of fixing too. Back then the land across the road was a sleepy campground by the lake with a bait shop that sold bologna sandwiches wrapped in wax paper, plus coffee you could stand a spoon in. Old Mr. Lyle ran it until the year he didn't. That was the year the signs went up. Lakeside Meadows, private community. Amenities. The bulldozers came with teeth bright as smiles and began to rearrange the earth as if it were a living room. Houses grew where pine trees had stood, neat and beige and close enough to pass a cup of sugar by leaning out a window. With the houses came rules. The board called them standards. Grass heights measured with rulers. Approved paint colors with names like Sand Dollar and Lakeshore Fog. Mailboxes that all looked like the others, the way a flock of geese looks like one bird if you squint. They told folks this would keep property values up and trouble far away. Some liked it. Some didn't. Most didn't ask questions. We weren't part of their community. Our land isn't inside their lines. But lines on paper don't keep smoke from crossing, and their rules drifted like wind into our days. It started small. Emails from a person named Community Liaison, asking if we could voluntarily align our fence line with their entrance for visual harmony. We said no thank you. Then came a letter saying the old dirt lane that runs along our eastern boundary was historic access to the lake. We checked the deed. It wasn't. The lane belonged to this farm, same as the walnut trees and the creek that chatters in March whether anyone is listening or not. Then people started parking by our gate to take pictures of sunsets over our pond. I don't mind folks enjoying a sunset. Sunsets aren't ours to keep. But people left trash and beer bottles and one time a dog, tied to our fence with a note. Can't keep her. Please be kind. We found the dog a home. The HOA sent stronger letters. Mandatory meeting regarding compliance with community standards. One said. Failure to attend may result in legal action. I called the number. We don't live in your subdivision. I told the woman who answered. We aren't members. We never agreed to anything. You benefit from our roads and amenities, she said, voice smooth as countertop marble. It's only fair you comply. I have my own road, I said. It's made of gravel and sweat. The first time I met Darla was at a town hall, the kind where folding chairs squeak and the coffee comes in a big silver urn. She stood at the mic in a crisp blazer and spoke like a practiced runner, breath even, pace fixed. We are not the enemy, she said. We are neighbors who want order. We can't have chaos. When it was my turn, I talked about my grandfather, who taught me fences aren't for trapping. They're for keeping promises. A good fence says what is yours and what is mine, I said. It says I won't take from you, and you won't take from me. But a fence isn't a wall against kindness. You can still pass bread across a fence. She smiled like a teacher smiles at a student who shows his work but still gets the answer wrong. We appreciate your perspective, Mr. Carter, she said. We'll be in touch. They were. First it was friendly reminders, tucked into our mailbox we hadn't given them permission to use. Then it was drones buzzing over our pasture to survey shoreline erosion. Emily brought lemonade out to the crew one day and said, if you asked first, we might have said yes. One man had the grace to look down at his boots. The others shrugged. I tried to be the kind of neighbor I want my kids to be. When a boy from Lakeside tipped his kayak in our creek and lost his glasses, I waded in up to my waist and found them with my toes, then handed them back like a prize. When a woman's car broke down by the bait shop lot, I gave her a lift and made sure she got home before dark. Kindness keeps the world from wobbling, my grandma used to say. I believe that. But kindness is not the same as surrender. We patched the fence where someone cut a square big enough for a person to slip through. We hung a new sign on the gate. Private farm, no trespassing. Call if you need help, and we put my number there. Not because I wanted to be called, but because I'd rather someone ask than cut wire again. On a Thursday in late July, a registered letter arrived with a seal that tried hard to look like a state seal. It said our gate blocked community lake access and had to be removed within 10 days. It said failure to comply would result in daily fines and enforcement visits. I set the letter on the kitchen table, and the paper looked like it was pretending to be heavier than it was. We drove to the county office. The clerk found our deed in a drawer that smelled like old books and rain. No easement, she murmured, finger following the neat typewritten lines. She showed us the map with our field edges drawn like the veins of a leaf. It was clear as noon. The lane was ours. We thought that would be the end. It wasn't. Saturday evening, just as the sun came low and turned the pond to hammered copper, Darla came to the fence with 2 men and a bolt cutter that shined like a wolf's smile. Emily was grilling burgers on the porch. Grace was drawing chalk cats on the driveway. I was oiling the gate hinge, because gates like to speak up if you don't listen to them now and then. You have until Monday, Darla called, chin high, voice carrying like a bell. Take down that gate or it's coming down for you. Not your land, I said. Not your say. The county confirmed it. Then we'll let a judge confirm it, she snapped. Or maybe we'll go around the judge and just get it done. I'm not scared of rustic bullies. I didn't raise my voice. I put the oil can down. There are kids here, I said. If you think you have a claim, take it to court. My door is open for a talk. My fence is closed for a fight. Her eyes slid past me to the porch. You think a cheap grill and some dirt under your nails make you king? She muttered. Move aside. Red Cap lifted the cutter. Gray Polo laughed, short and mean. I stepped forward and set myself between them and the gate, palm out like a crossing guard. No, I said. It was a small word. Felt like a big one. They took a step anyway. Arlo placed himself between Grace and the men and let out a sound I had only heard once. The night a coyote got too bold. He'll bite, Gray Polo warned, as if the dog were ours to blame for the trespass too. I'll bite first, Grace whispered from behind Emily's leg. She is 8 and fierce and learning when to stand and when to step back. My heart climbed into my throat and stayed there, hanging like a porch swing caught by a gust. That was when Darla made the threat that turned a bad evening into a storm. She leaned forward, eyes hard. If you don't take down that gate, I will make your life so small you'll wish this farm was a postage stamp, she said. I will report your animals. I will report your water use. I will fine you until you sell this place to someone who knows how to live in a community. And if I see your kid on our side of the line again, I will have her escorted home by security, and it won't be gentle. Some words you can forgive later, some you can't. Threatening a child is a fire you don't light unless you want to watch things burn. I turned to Emily, and in that look we had a whole conversation we'd had before, about standing firm, about calling the sheriff, about not being the first to push, about never letting fear be the boss of our house. I told Darla we were calling the sheriff. I told her we had the letter from the county. I told her we'd hand it to whoever came. I told her to leave. She put her foot on the lowest rail of the fence. Move, she said. I went to the barn and took the rifle down from the rack where it lives above the seed bags. I did not slam any doors. I did not try to scare anyone. I stepped back into the light where everyone could see me. Stop, I said. And it wasn't loud, but it carried. Gray Polo laughed again. He won't, he said, turning to Darla like a stage whisper that wanted to be heard. He's the type who talks about values. Last warning, I said. Darla swung one leg over the fence. Her heel dug into my field. It felt like a small knife going into an old map. Redcap tugged the cutter into position. Grace whimpered. That little high sound I hear again at night when the house is quiet and my mind watches the day walking away. And now we are back where we started, with the crack of the shot snapping the day in half and the present rushing at us the way rain rushes down a hill. Darla on the ground, phone to her ear, saying I shot her. Me kneeling, tying the bandana, saying breathe. Emily on the porch, voice steady as she gives our address to the dispatcher. Yes, shots fired, yes, one injured, yes, my husband is here, yes, the trespassers are here, yes, we're safe right now. Arlo pressed into my thigh. The men standing like they weren't sure if the play was over or if there was one more act. When you spend a life with animals and weather and bills that don't care if it rained or didn't, you learn something important. You can do everything right and still meet trouble. What you do next is who you are. I looked at Darla. You're not going to die, I said. I won't let that happen, even if you hate me tomorrow. Her eyes glassed with tears she didn't want. For a heartbeat they softened. I saw not the HOA badge and the blazer, but a tired person who wanted control of something in a world that spins even when we wish it would pause. I thought of the boy whose glasses I found in the creek. I thought of the dog we rehomed. I thought kindness doesn't make you weak. It makes you strong enough to set a hard line and still hold someone's hand when they trip over it. The sirens grew into the lane, blue and red washing our fence like a storm light. 2 squad cars, then an ambulance, then a white SUV with the county seal. Tires crunched gravel. Doors flew open. Sheriff's office. A voice boomed. Hands where we can see them. I raised my hands from Darla's tourniquet and lifted them into the golden air. I'm armed, I called. Rifle on the ground. 2 o'clock for me, safety on. I am the property owner. I am the caller. Back away from the injured party. The same voice commanded. Now. I eased back. Emily's voice called. I'm the wife. We have the deed and the letter. Our daughter is inside now. My chest burned with the kind of calm that hurts. I kept my hands up and my eyes on the deputy in front. Sheriff Daniels. A man with a mustache that made him look like he belonged on a calendar labeled, America's Dads. We'd met him at the 4th of July parade. He liked the lemon bars Emily made. I wondered if he remembered. Darla's phone was still on speaker. Dispatch was saying, Ma'am, stay on the line with me. And Darla said, thin and small, they shot me. And the world tried to pivot under my boots. She trespassed and threatened my family. I said, voice shake free by sheer will. I fired to stop and advance. I applied a tourniquet. I am not resisting. Redcap pointed at me, spitting mad. He snapped. He yelled. He hates the HOA. He aimed right at her. Gray Polo added, arrest him. This is a community official. She was doing her job. Sheriff Daniels didn't look at them. He looked at me. He looked at Emily. He looked at the fence. He looked at the bolt cutter glinting in Redcap's hand. He looked at Grace's chalk cats on the driveway. Bright pink and yellow. A world inside a world. His jaw worked the way a man's jaw works when he is building a thought and deciding where to set it. Hands higher. Another deputy barked at me and I did. A third moved toward Darla, checking the bandana, calling numbers to the EMTs. Pulse is fine, he said. Through and through lower leg. Lucky. I don't feel lucky, Darla muttered. Tears on her face now. Pride sitting beside her like a cat that didn't know whether to hiss or purr. She looked from me to the deputies. He shot me while I was fulfilling a community notice, she said. He's dangerous. Ma'am, Sheriff Daniels said, still watching me. Did you cross the fence before or after he fired? She started to answer. The sirens seemed to hum in the gap. A wind picked up, gentle, turning the pond to ripples and lifting the corner of the letter Emily held in her shaking hand. And right there, with the blue lights painting the barn and the neighbors beginning to gather at the end of the lane like crows on a wire, the shout came that split the moment like lightning. Gun! A deputy yelled from behind me. Gun in the Redcap's waistband. Every head turned. Redcap flinched. His hand twitched toward the metal at his hip. The deputy's hands went to their own holsters as if pulled by one string. Don't you move, Sheriff Daniels thundered. The world held its breath on the edge of a knife. Where are you watching from? The shout of gun. cracked the night open wider than my rifle had. Every deputy's hand snapped to their holsters, and for half a second the world tilted on the edge of a tragedy no one could walk back from. Red Cap froze, one hand hovering an inch from the steel tucked into his waistband. His face was pale under the flashing lights, but his jaw worked stubborn, like a man too proud to swallow his own fear. "Don't!" Sheriff Daniels barked, voice rolling like thunder down the lane. "You move that hand and you'll never use it again." Gray Polo stepped back, palms flying into the air. "I told him not to bring it," he shouted, betraying his friend without hesitation. "I told him." The deputies advanced, rifles angled low but ready, boots crunching gravel with the kind of rhythm that says they mean business. Red Cap's bravado broke. He raised his hands slowly, fingers trembling. One deputy lunged, pinned him against the fence, and yanked the pistol free. The sound of it hitting the ground, metal on gravel, felt like a stone dropping into a deep well. Relief rushed through me, but it was tangled with fear, too, because in the eyes of the law, the scene was still muddy. One person bleeding, one farmer with a smoking rifle, and another man armed where he shouldn't have been. Sheriff Daniels pointed to me. "Carter, you stay right there. Don't move." His voice was steady, but I caught the way his eyes flicked from me to Emily, to Grace's chalk drawings still glowing faint under the cruiser lights. "I'm not moving," I said. My palms were still high, fingers stretched until they hurt. The gravel under my boots felt like it was pressing through my soles, sharp and real. The EMTs moved in on Darla, shifting me aside like a folding chair. She winced as they lifted her onto a stretcher. "He shot me," she whimpered, eyes darting from me to Daniels. "While I was just doing my job." "You trespassed," I said, voice quieter than I meant. "You threatened my child." "Liar," she spat. The word was sharp, but it carried fear with it. Emily stepped forward then, calm as a stone in a river. She held out the county letter with one hand and Grace's small fingers with the other. "We have proof of ownership," she said, "and I have the call logs. We reported this before anyone crossed the fence." Daniels took the letter, scanning it with eyes that knew how to read more than just words. Eyes that read people, too. His jaw tightened. "We'll sort the paper later," he said. "Right now, everyone stays calm." The deputies shoved Red Cap into cuffs. His bravado melted into curses under his breath. Gray Polo tried to argue, but Daniels silenced him with one look, the kind of look that strips a man of excuses. And me? I stood there, rifle on the dirt, wishing more than anything that none of it had happened. Wishing I'd never had to fire that shot. Wishing my daughter hadn't seen it, hadn't heard it, hadn't had her safe world cracked open like a walnut. But wishing doesn't fix the present. They loaded Darla into the ambulance, her voice fading as the doors closed. "He shot me. He shot me." It echoed in my ears even as the sirens started again. When the vehicles pulled away, only the cruisers remained, their lights painting long shadows across the barn. Sheriff Daniels stepped closer, his boots scuffing the gravel. He stopped in front of me, close enough that I could smell the faint trace of tobacco on his jacket. "Jake," he said, his voice quieter now, almost personal. "Tell me exactly what happened. From the moment you saw them at the fence." I told him everything. My words were slow, deliberate, like laying out tools on a workbench so nothing gets misplaced. The trespass, the bolt cutters, the threat to Grace, the warning I gave, the shot aimed low meant to stop, not to kill, the bandana tourniquet. Every detail I remembered I gave him. He listened without interrupting, just nodding once or twice, eyes never leaving my face. When I finished, the silence stretched like wire between us. Finally, he said, "You know this isn't clean, Jake. Shooting someone never is. But I believe you didn't mean to kill her. And that might just save you." I swallowed hard. "Sheriff, I don't want saving for myself. I want saving for my family. I don't care what it costs me, but I won't have them living in fear." Emily squeezed Grace's hand tighter. I saw her shoulders relax just a fraction, like she was proud of me for saying it out loud. Daniel sighed, rubbed his mustache. "You'll have to come in for a statement. Tonight. We can't leave it hanging." "I'll come," I said. "But Emily and Grace stay here. They've had enough for one night." Emily looked at me like she wanted to argue, then nodded. "We'll be here when you get back." The deputies collected the rifle as evidence. I watched them bag it up, the familiar weight leaving my world, and I felt strangely lighter and heavier at the same time. As they guided me toward the cruiser, Grace's voice piped up, small but fierce. "Daddy didn't do wrong. He was protecting us." The deputies paused. Daniels looked back at her. His face softened, just a little. "Sometimes, sweetheart, the world doesn't see things as simple as right and wrong. Sometimes it's about proof." Her eyes narrowed, stubborn as her mother's. "Well, I saw, and I know." Emily pulled her close, whispering something I couldn't hear. The sight of them, standing in the porch light, was the last thing I carried with me as the cruiser door shut. Inside, the air smelled of vinyl and polish, the divider glass making me feel like a stranger in my own town. I stared out at the farm as we rolled away, the barn, the windmill, the chalk cats on the driveway slowly fading into darkness. At the station, they led me into a room with walls too white and lights too bright. Daniels sat across from me, recorder blinking red. "Start again," he said. "Every detail, word for word." I spoke. The night stretched on. My throat grew dry. My heart kept tripping over itself. And still I told it all, because truth was the only weapon I had left. By the time they were done, dawn was starting to smear pink across the horizon. Daniels leaned back. Recorder switched off. "Go home," he said. "You're not under arrest for now, but this isn't over. They'll press charges. She'll paint you as reckless. And the HOA has lawyers with teeth." I nodded, exhausted but steady. "Then I'll stand in court the same way I stood at that fence. Firm, honest, protecting what's mine." Daniels studied me a moment, then gave a small nod. "Just be ready." When Emily picked me up, Grace was asleep in the back seat, her head on a pillow, her hand curled around the edge of her sketchpad. The chalk cats were smudged into rainbows. She'd drawn more. This time, a stick figure family standing tall beside a big square fence. Above it, she'd scrawled in shaky letters, "Safe." I felt something crack inside me, not like a break, but like a seed splitting open. Maybe this fight wasn't just about land. Maybe it was about showing my daughter that strength and kindness can live in the same heart. That fences can be firm without being cruel. That standing your ground doesn't mean hardening your soul. But just as I let myself breathe, just as the warmth of home pulled me back, headlights swept across the gravel drive. A sleek black SUV pulled up, windows tinted. The door opened slow, deliberate, and out stepped a man in a sharp suit, polished shoes crunching the gravel like he owned it. He looked straight at me, briefcase in hand, and said, "Mr. Carter, I represent the Lakeside Meadows Homeowners Association. We need to talk now." The man's voice cut through the early dawn like a blade on glass. His suit looked too crisp for a farm lane, and his shoes were the kind you could see your reflection in if you dared to look. He didn't smile, didn't frown, just watched me with eyes that said he'd walked into more living rooms and courtrooms than barns. Emily instinctively shifted closer to me, her arm brushing mine. Grace stirred in the back seat, half asleep, whispering, "Daddy?" before sinking back into her pillow. The man tilted his head toward the SUV as if it were a stage and he'd just cued my line. "I'm Thomas Kearns," he said, smooth as a radio announcer. "Legal counsel for Lakeside Meadows HOA. You and I are about to spend a lot of time together." The arrogance in his tone rubbed me raw, but I bit down on the urge to snap. Emily's hand touched mine, grounding me. "Now isn't the time," I said, voice low. "Oh, Mr. Carter," Kearns replied, stepping closer, his briefcase swinging like a gavel. "It's exactly the time. My client was shot on your property. She's already filed a criminal complaint. And as of this morning, Lakeside Meadows will be pursuing civil damages against you and your enterprise." His eyes flicked toward our farmhouse as if it were a failed investment. Emily stiffened. "Enterprise?" she repeated, her voice calm but laced with fire. "This is our home, our family." Kearns smirked, the kind of smirk that belongs to men who think papers and pens can bulldoze people. "Call it what you like. The HOA sees it differently, and they have the resources to make their view the only one that matters." I stepped forward, gravel crunching under my boots. "You listen to me?" I said, voice steady but sharp. "This land's been in my family longer than your subdivision's been a sparkle in a developer's eye. We have deeds, we have county records, and we have truth. I won't be bullied." Something flickered in his eyes. Not fear, not respect, maybe annoyance. He opened his briefcase, pulled out a thick stack of papers and held them out. "Then you'll want to read these. Cease and desist order. Injunction. Demand for removal of your illegal gate. Expect a court summons within the week." Emily snatched the papers before I could. "We'll let our lawyer look at them," she said firmly, even though we didn't yet have a lawyer. Kearns adjusted his cufflinks like he'd just won a point in a chess game. "See that you do, because if you don't fight properly, this farm won't be your problem much longer. It'll be someone else's prize." He gave a curt nod, turned, and climbed back into the SUV. The engine purred, gravel spat, and then he was gone, leaving exhaust and tension behind. Emily's hand trembled as she held the papers. "Jake," she whispered. "They're not stopping. They're going to bleed us dry." I looked toward the farmhouse, toward the barn, toward the chalk cats smudged on the driveway. My jaw set. "Then we fight smart. We won't give them what they want." The sun climbed higher, casting gold across the fields, but the weight on my chest didn't lift. That day, the farm moved as farms do, Chores don't stop for trouble. Cows still needed feeding. Fences still needed mending. And life went on even with storm clouds overhead. Emily cooked breakfast, though her eyes kept darting to the kitchen window as if the SUV might roll back up. Grace tried to draw more cats on the porch, though her chalk trembled in her hand. I forced myself to act normal, to saddle the tractor and fix the pasture line, but every hammer strike felt like it echoed. Fight, fight, fight. By afternoon, the calm cracked again. A drone buzzed low over the pasture, its little black eye sweeping across the cattle. Arlo barked and chased it, teeth snapping at air. Grace shrieked, covering her ears. I waved my arms and shouted, but it hovered defiantly before zipping back toward the subdivision. That evening, Emily found another envelope in our mailbox, and signed, just the HOA logo. Inside was a photo of me, rifle raised, Darla midfall, blood on her pants. The caption scrawled across the bottom in bold marker, dangerous, unstable, unfit. Emily's face drained of color. They're spying on us, she whispered. I clenched the paper until it crumpled. This isn't just about a fence anymore, I said. This is war. But even in war, a man has to find balance. That night, after we tucked Grace in, I sat on the porch with Emily. The cicadas sang, and the air smelled of hay and dew. I took her hand, roughened by years of work but soft in the places that mattered. We can't let them turn us into monsters, I murmured. If we fight hate with more hate, they win. Grace needs to see we can be strong without being cruel. Emily leaned her head on my shoulder. Kindness is what makes us different from them, she said softly. But kindness doesn't mean weakness. We'll find the line. For a while, we just listened to the night. Stars blinked overhead, quiet witnesses to our struggle. Then headlights appeared again. This time, not an SUV, not the sheriff. Just a neighbor's pickup, pulling into our lane. It was Hank Miller, a retired mechanic who lived outside the HOA lines like us. He climbed out, gray beard bristling, carrying a pie dish in his hands. Heard about the trouble, Hank said gruffly. Brought cherry pie. Figured you could use it. Emily smiled through the strain. Thank you, Hank. He set the pie on the porch rail, then leaned close. You ain't alone, Jake. Lot of folks out here don't like what that HOA's doing. You say the word, and we'll stand with you. Something warm cut through the cold that had been sitting on my chest. Appreciate it, I said, gripping his hand. Might just take you up on that. After Hank left, Emily and I shared the pie straight from the dish, 2 forks clinking. It was tart and sweet, a reminder that not all neighbors are enemies. But peace doesn't last. As we blew out the porch light and turned in for the night, a sound shattered the calm. A loud bang from the barn. Arlo barked furiously, claws scratching the floor. I grabbed a flashlight, heart pounding, and raced outside. Emily called after me, "Be careful!" The barn doors were ajar, swinging in the breeze. I pushed them open, light cutting through the dark. The hay bales were scattered, the feed sacks slashed open. Cows mooed nervously, hoofs stamping. And on the back wall, sprayed in red paint, were the words, "Sell or burn." My blood ran cold. This wasn't just pressure. This was a threat that reached into the heart of my farm, into the heart of my family. And I knew right then, the next chapter of this fight wasn't going to be in court. It was going to be here in the dirt where we lived. The red paint dripped down the barn wall like blood. The words glaring back at me in the flashlight beam. Sell or burn. My hands trembled, not from fear of the threat itself, but from rage. Rage that someone had stepped into the heartbeat of my family's life and marked it like we were cattle to be branded. Arlo growled low beside me, his hackles up, eyes fixed on the shadows. The cows were restless, stomping and snorting, as if they too sensed something evil had passed through. Emily's voice came from behind me, thin and tight. Jake, what is it? I turned, the beam still on the wall, and her gasp tore at me. She pulled Grace into her arms, covering her eyes, but Grace had already seen. Her small voice quivered. Daddy, are they going to burn our farm? I crouched low, forcing my voice steady. No, sweetheart, they won't. I promise you that. I said it like a prayer, but deep down, I knew promises like that could only be kept with more than words. Emily's grip tightened on Grace. They were here, Jake, in our barn, while we slept. The thought clawed at me. Someone had crossed our fence, broken into our barn, and left a threat bold as a slap. That wasn't just intimidation, it was escalation. I called Sheriff Daniels immediately. When his cruiser pulled up, lights sweeping across the barnyard, I almost felt relief. But his expression when he saw the spray paint was grave, not surprised. They're playing dirty, he muttered, running a hand over his mustache. Vandalism. Criminal threat. I'll file it. But you need to understand, this is getting bigger than my office can contain. HOA lawyers will argue it's unrelated. And if this keeps up, Someone's bound to get hurt worse than last night. I won't let that happen, I said firmly. Daniel's eyes met mine, heavy with the weight of too many years on the job. Jake, I know you mean well, but men who think they've got power like this HOA don't stop just because you ask them to. They only stop when something forces them to. After he left, I lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling. Emily curled against me, Grace tucked between us. All of us crowded into one bed because fear had made the house feel too big, too exposed. My mind kept circling the same thought. How far would the HOA go to drive us out? Morning came, and with it, whispers. Word of the shooting, of Darla's injury, of the barn vandalism spread faster than smoke in a dry wind. At the diner in town, people stared when I walked in. Some nodded with sympathy. Others whispered behind their coffee cups. One man muttered, "Trigger-happy farmer." Just loud enough for me to hear. But then Mrs. Miller from down the road touched my arm gently. "You did what you had to do, Jake. Don't let them paint you bad for protecting your own." That kindness was a small flame against the cold. When I got back to the farm, Hank Miller was already there with two more neighbors. Earl, a wiry old rancher, and Tanya, a single mom raising goats with a backbone strong as steel. They stood in my driveway, arms crossed, eyes fierce. "We heard what happened," Tanya said. "We're not letting you fight this alone." Hank nodded. "The HOA's been sniffing around all of us for months. You're just the first they pushed this far. You stand, we stand." For the first time in days, I felt the ground steady under me. "Thank you," I said, voice thick. "But this isn't just about fences or barns anymore. They threaten my family. They came onto my land at night." "Then it's war," Earl said simply. His old eyes gleamed. "But wars aren't won by bullets. They're won by standing together." We spent the day patching the barn, scrubbing at the hateful red words until only faint scars remained. Grace painted flowers over the stains with her chalks, her little hands determined. "See, Daddy?" she said. "Now it's pretty again." That night we gathered on the porch with our neighbors. Emily made lemonade. Tanya brought biscuits. Hank told stories about standing up to bullies in his youth. Laughter bubbled for the first time in days, though it was laced with tension. We were building something stronger than fear, community. But as the sun dipped, a shadow stretched across the lane. Another car. Not the sheriff. Not a neighbor. It was Darla's husband, Richard. A tall man with a thick mustache and anger burning in his eyes. He strode up the porch steps without asking, his voice booming. "You think you can shoot my wife and get away with it?" Hank rose to his feet, broad shoulders squaring. "Back off, Richard. This ain't the place." But Richard's eyes were locked on me. He jabbed a finger in my chest. "You're finished, Carter. HOA's going to ruin you. And if they don't, I will." I stood slowly, meeting his glare head-on. "You want to talk, we'll talk. You want to fight, you'll leave disappointed. But you step 1 foot past this porch rail, and you'll be trespassing just like your wife." His face twisted, rage fighting against restraint. For a second I thought he'd swing. The air was tight, neighbors tense, Emily clutching Grace close. Then Richard spat on the ground, turned, and stormed back to his truck. Tires spun gravel as he tore away into the night. Silence fell heavy. Hank muttered, "This ain't cooling down anytime soon." Emily's voice was quiet but steady. "Then we hold tighter. Kindness where we can, strength where we must. But we won't let them break us." I looked out at the dark lane, headlights gone, only crickets singing now. And I knew this was just the beginning. The HOA had money, lawyers, power, but we had something stronger, roots. And roots don't pull easy. Still, even as I tried to believe that, a part of me couldn't shake the feeling that the next strike wouldn't just be paint or threats. It would be something worse. And I was right, because the very next morning, I walked out to the pasture and found 3 of my cows lying still in the grass, their bellies swollen, their mouths foaming. Poison. Someone had poisoned them in the night. The war had turned deadly. The sight of those cows will never leave me. Their eyes were wide open, frozen in shock, as if they hadn't understood why their bodies betrayed them. Foam crusted at their mouths, and the grass around them was flattened, as though they had struggled in their final moments. Arlo whined low in his throat, circling the bodies but careful not to touch them. Grace came running from the porch, still in her pajamas, but I caught her in time, scooping her up before she could see too much. Emily's scream cut through the air behind me, half fury, half grief. "Jake," she whispered, clutching her robe, tears already spilling. "They killed them. They really did it." I set Grace down, crouched low so she'd see my eyes and not the death behind me. "Sweetheart, go inside with Mommy. Help her make breakfast. Daddy's got to handle this." "But Daddy..." Her little lips trembled. "Why would someone hurt our cows?" I forced a smile I didn't feel. "Because they don't understand kindness. But we do. Go on now." Emily gathered Grace close, both of them shaking. Jake, you call the sheriff right now. I did. Daniels arrived with 2 deputies within the hour, their boots crunching through the wet grass as they examined the carcasses. One deputy bent low, sniffed, then shook his head. Smells like strychnine. My fists curled. Strychnine. Rat poison. A coward's weapon. This isn't vandalism anymore, Daniels said grimly. This is felony-level cruelty. Whoever did this wanted to send a message. I barked a bitter laugh. Message received. But they've made one mistake. They think I scare easy. Daniels put a hand on my shoulder. Don't take this into your own hands, Jake. Let us investigate. With all respect, Sheriff, I said, voice shaking with fury. They're crossing lines faster than you can chase. First trespassing, then threats, then vandalism, now killing livestock. What's next? My dog? My wife? My child? Daniels didn't answer. He didn't have to. His silence said enough. The deputies hauled the carcasses away for testing. The farm felt empty without the lowing of those cows, like a part of its soul had been carved out. Emily and Grace stayed inside, blinds closed. Even the chickens were quiet, as if the animals themselves understood the danger. By afternoon, word had spread. Hank showed up again, fists balled. Heard about the cattle. You're not standing alone, Jake. We'll camp out here if we have to. And they did. That night, Hank parked his truck at the end of the lane with a shotgun resting across his lap. Tanya brought her teenage son, who stood watch with a flashlight and a baseball bat. Earl showed up with an old hound dog and a thermos of coffee, muttering, "Ain't slept good since '82 anyway." Their presence warmed me, but fear still gnawed at my gut. For every good neighbor who came, there was someone in Lakeside Meadows sharpening their knives, whether metaphorical or real. Emily sat with me on the porch while the others kept watch. The air was heavy with the smell of hay and fear. She held my hand, her voice steady but quiet. "Jake, we can't let this eat us alive. They want us angry. They want us desperate. That's how they win." I turned to her. "So what do we do? Just sit here and wait for the next attack?" "No," she said firmly. "We keep living. We plant kindness where they plant hate. And we protect our home with everything we've got." Her words sank into me like seeds in fresh soil. She was right. Rage wouldn't save us. Love would. But that didn't mean standing down. It meant standing smarter. The next morning, I went into town and hired a lawyer. Margaret Willis, a tough woman with streaks of gray in her hair and a reputation for never backing down. When I told her everything, she didn't flinch. "They're trying to run you into the ground, Jake," she said. "But they've already made mistakes. Trespassing, intimidation, poisoning livestock. We'll file counterclaims, and we'll make the law work for us." For the first time since the shot, I felt a spark of hope. But hope is fragile. That evening, as I walked back from the pasture, I noticed something strange. The gate latch, solid steel, always shut tight, was hanging open. My heart lurched. I sprinted toward the house, yelling Emily's name. She came rushing onto the porch, pale, clutching Grace. "Jake!" she cried. Someone was in the yard. I heard footsteps. The screen door rattled like someone tried to open it. Rage and fear collided inside me. Whoever they were, they weren't just after my land anymore. They were circling my family, testing the walls, pushing closer. I grabbed the shotgun Hank had left for me, loaded it, and stood in the yard, scanning the shadows. My voice thundered across the fields. "You come onto my land again, you'll regret it." The night answered with silence. But I knew they had heard. We barricaded the doors, neighbors doubling their watch. Emily tucked Grace into bed, whispering prayers over her. I sat by the window with the shotgun across my knees, eyes burning into the darkness. And then, just past midnight, a glow flickered at the edge of the pasture. Orange, hungry, climbing. "Fire!" Hank shouted from the lane. I bolted outside. The old hay shed was ablaze, flames licking at the sky, sparks flying toward the barn. The heat slammed me in the face, hot enough to blister. Emily screamed behind me, dragging Grace to the porch. Arlo barked wildly, running in frantic circles. I grabbed the hose, neighbors rushed with buckets, but the flames roared louder, greedy. The shed collapsed in a shower of sparks, the fire inching closer to the barn, to the animals, to everything we'd built. This wasn't vandalism. This wasn't intimidation. This was war, and they just lit the first battle on fire. The fire ate the night sky alive. Orange flames clawed upward, smoke twisting into black fists that punched holes through the stars. The hay shed collapsed in a groan of burning wood, sparks raining across the pasture like fireworks gone wrong. The heat was so fierce it pressed against my skin like an open oven door, even from 20 feet back. Neighbors rushed toward the blaze, buckets in hand, Hank's truck headlights cutting a sharp path across the field. Earl dragged a hose from his truck bed, hollering, "Keep it away from the barn!" Tanya's boy sprinted back and forth with a shovel, slapping sparks before they caught the grass. Emily stood on the porch clutching Grace, both of them trembling silhouettes against the glow. Arlo barked until his throat went raw, then stayed glued to their side, as if he knew his only job was to keep them safe. I gripped the hose, water hissing against the fire, but it was like spitting into a hurricane. The hay was too dry, the flames too hungry. My throat burned with smoke, my eyes stung, my arms shook from the heat and strain, but I refused to back down. This was no accident. I spat, coughing. They lit this, Hank shouted back through the roar. Of course they did, but we'll damn well put it out. And we did. Neighbors fought with everything they had, hoses, shovels, sheer willpower. Sweat streamed down our faces, smoke painted our lungs, but we stood shoulder to shoulder, beating the fire back inch by inch. At last, when the first hints of dawn brushed the horizon, the flames died to smoldering ash. The shed was gone. Nothing but a skeleton of black beams, but the barn still stood. The animals inside were shaken but alive. I dropped to my knees in the mud, gasping, my arms limp. Emily ran to me, pressing her hands to my face, tears streaking through soot. You're alive, she whispered. That's all that matters. You're alive. Grace threw her arms around my neck, sobbing. I thought the fire was going to eat you, Daddy. I held her tight. Not me, baby girl. Not me. But inside, I was burning with something worse than fire. Fury. They hadn't just vandalized, or threatened, or poisoned. They'd tried to destroy my livelihood outright. They'd risked lives, and they thought they'd get away with it. When Sheriff Daniels arrived, the smoldering ruins still smoked behind us. He looked older than ever, his mustache sagging, his shoulders heavy. He shook his head, muttering, "This isn't just neighbor trouble anymore. This is arson. This is war." I grabbed his arm, my voice raw. "Then treat it like war, Sheriff. They're escalating every night. What will it take before the law steps in? When someone dies?" His eyes met mine, tired but steady. "Jake, I'm not blind. I know what's happening. But you need evidence. Fire doesn't point fingers. And the HOA's lawyers will spin this as an accident unless you can prove otherwise." "Prove it," I growled. "I know who did this." Daniels didn't flinch. "Knowing and proving are two different things. Don't make me arrest you for taking this into your own hands." Emily tugged my sleeve, whispering, "Jake, please, Grace is watching." I swallowed my rage. Sheriff Daniels wasn't wrong, but he wasn't enough. Not anymore. That evening, after the sheriff left, I called a meeting. Hank, Tanya, Earl, and a handful of other neighbors gathered around our kitchen table. The room smelled of smoke and sweat, the air thick with tension. "They've crossed every line," I said, slamming my fist on the table. "We can't just wait for the sheriff or the courts. We need to protect ourselves." "What are you suggesting?" Tanya asked, her eyes sharp. "Watches," I said. "Round-the-clock patrols. Cameras on the fences. Dogs posted near the barns. We make it clear, this land isn't free for trespassing anymore." Earl nodded, eyes blazing. "About time. You've been fighting alone too long. They want a war? Let's give them one." Hank leaned forward, his rough hands gripping the table. "But we fight smart, Jake. Not with bullets. Not unless we have no choice. If we show restraint, the law will see who the aggressors are. We need evidence. Hard proof." Emily's voice broke through the growl of men's anger. "And we need kindness," she said, her tone firm but gentle. "If we become as cruel as they are, we've already lost. Let's protect, not provoke." Her words steadied the room. Even in war, she reminded us of the line we couldn't cross. That night, neighbors stayed on shifts around our property. Earl parked his old pickup by the south fence with a lantern glowing on the dash. Tanya's boy sat near the barn with Arlo at his side, flashlight sweeping the fields. Hank sat on our porch, shotgun across his lap, humming low like a man who'd done this before. For a while, the farm was quiet. Too quiet. Then, around midnight, I heard it, the crunch of boots on gravel near the back fence. I slipped out the back door, shotgun in hand, heart hammering. Hank raised his chin, signaling he heard it too. We crept through the dark, grass damp against our boots, until the shadows at the fence came into focus. Two figures, dressed in black, cutting at the wire with bolt cutters. "Hey!" I roared. "Step away from that fence." They froze. For one heartbeat I thought they'd run. But instead, one of them lifted a hand and pointed something shiny in our direction. The world narrowed, the night holding its breath. "A gun." "Down!" Hank shouted. A shot rang out, slicing the dark, the sound ricocheting off the barns and trees. Sparks flew as the bullet hit the fence post near my head. It was no longer a standoff. It was war, and now it had turned into a firefight. The crack of the gunshot ripped through the night, louder than thunder, sharper than a whip. The bullet splintered the wooden fence post inches from my head, shards of wood flying into the grass. My heart slammed against my ribs, but I didn't flinch. I had no choice, I had to stand my ground. Gunfire! Hank bellowed, diving to the side. His shotgun was up, but he didn't fire. He knew the law, knew that if we shot first without proof of threat, the HOA's lawyers would tear us apart. Still, his voice carried across the farm like a siren. They're armed. From the porch, Emily screamed my name. I saw the glow of her flashlight flicker wildly as she shielded Grace behind her. Arlo barked, savage and furious, the sound tearing through the night. I gripped the shotgun, my voice thundering across the pasture. Put the gun down. This is private land. Sheriff's already on his way. But the men in black didn't back down. One shouted, "This isn't your land anymore." His voice was muffled, probably under a mask, but the hate was clear. He raised his pistol again, the metal glinting in the moonlight. This time I didn't wait. I fired a warning shot into the ground at their feet. Dirt and sparks exploded upward, the crack shaking the night. "Next one won't miss," I roared. The two figures hesitated. For a heartbeat I thought they'd retreat. But then the second one lunged forward with the bolt cutters, snapping at the fence wire like a wolf gnawing at a bone. Sparks flew from the metal. Earl came charging from the south fence, flashlight blazing in one hand, his hound growling beside him. "Drop it, you cowards," he hollered, swinging the beam straight into their faces. The light caught them for just a second, long enough for me to see one thing clear. These weren't strangers. They weren't random thugs. They were HOA men. I recognized the sharp jaw of Gray Polo, the one who had stood by Darla that night, and the other, Red Cap, the same man caught with a pistol at his waist before. The realization hit me like a hammer. The same people who claimed to uphold community rules were the ones sneaking onto my land with guns, trying to tear down fences in the dead of night. They cursed, blinded by Earl's light, then turned and bolted back toward the trees. Shots cracked behind them, wild and reckless, but none of us fired back. We couldn't afford to. Instead, we chased them to the fence line, Hank's voice booming after them. "We've got your faces now. You're done." Their silhouettes vanished into the subdivision woods, leaving only the smell of gunpowder and the faint echo of their boots. My chest heaved, sweat pouring down my neck despite the cool night air. Emily came running, Grace clutched tight in her arms, tears streaking her cheeks. "Jake!" she cried, grabbing me. "You could have been killed." I wrapped my arms around them both, pulling them close. "So could all of us," I whispered. "But not tonight. Not while I still breathe." The deputies arrived 20 minutes later, lights washing the fields blue and red. Sheriff Daniels climbed out, his face set like stone. He looked at the splintered fence post, the bullet casings we'd collected, the snapped wire. His sigh was heavy. "They're getting bold," he said. "Too bold." "Bold?" I spat. "They fired at me. At us. You've got witnesses, you've got casings, you've got faces. What more do you need?" Daniels rubbed his temples. "I'll file charges, but those men will claim you shot first. Their lawyers will twist it until no one knows what happened." Earl stepped forward, jabbing a finger in the air. "Sheriff, I saw it. They raised their gun first. Jake warned them and he fired in the dirt. You know the truth." Daniels nodded slowly. "I do. But courtrooms don't run on truth alone. They run on proof and politics." My fists clenched so tight my knuckles cracked. "So what do I do? Just sit here waiting for them to kill us?" The sheriff's eyes met mine, hard and unblinking. "No. You gather evidence. You get cameras, you document every threat, every trespass, every shot fired. If the law won't protect you, then you make the law undeniable." That night we doubled the watches. We strung up trail cameras along every fence post, floodlights rigged to motion sensors, even old hunting cams borrowed from neighbors. If the HOA thought they could creep through the dark unnoticed, they were about to find out otherwise. But fear still gripped my house. Grace woke screaming twice, sobbing, "The fire's back! The men are back!" Emily rocked her, whispering lullabies through her own tears. I sat awake by the window, shotgun across my lap, staring at the shadows until dawn. Morning came heavy, the kind of tired that seeps into your bones. I walked the fence line with Earl, checking the damage. The wire was snapped clean, posts leaning. Earl spat into the dirt. "They'll keep coming, Jake. You and I both know it." "I know," I said, "but so will we." And then, as if to prove his words, a new letter arrived that afternoon. Delivered not by mail, not by sheriff, but slid under our gate. Emily found it first, her hands trembling as she opened it. Inside was a single sheet, typed neat and cold. "Leave within 30 days, or next time we won't miss." The paper slipped from her fingers, fluttering to the dirt. Grace picked it up, her little eyes scanning the words before I could snatch it away. Daddy? She whispered, voice shaking. What does next time we won't miss mean? My throat closed. I pulled her into my arms, holding her so tight she squeaked. I couldn't answer, couldn't lie, because I knew exactly what it meant. It meant the war had only just begun. The letter weighed on me like a stone strapped to my chest. Next time we won't miss. Those 6 words didn't just threaten, they promised. And promises like that aren't made by cowards. They're made by people willing to go all the way. I burned the letter in the fire pit out back, but the words stayed burned into my mind. Emily watched the flames lick it into ash, her face pale. Jake, she said softly. They're not going to stop. They won't stop until one of us is in the ground. I pulled her close, kissed her temple, and forced strength into my voice. Then they'll find out just how deep these roots go. I won't let them take us down. But inside, I was shaking. Not for myself, I'd weathered storms before. I was shaking for Emily, for Grace, for the family who depended on me to keep them safe. That night, the farm turned into a fortress. Neighbors circled shifts, trucks parked at corners, floodlights glowing. Earl brought over 2 more hounds that prowled the fence line. Tanya's boy set up trail cams higher in the trees. Every rustle in the grass, every shadow crossing the moonlight made my hand twitch toward the shotgun. And then, for a few nights, nothing. No intruders, no fires, no shots. Just silence, heavy and tense. The kind of calm you know won't last. It was almost worse than the chaos. Waiting, wondering when the storm would break again. By the 4th night, exhaustion had settled into my bones. I sat on the porch, eyes sagging, when Hank joined me. He passed me a cup of coffee, strong enough to burn through fatigue. They're trying to scare you out, Jake, he said, voice low. But you ain't the type to scare easy. That's what's got them riled. HOA's built on control, and you're the one man they can't control. I sighed, staring at the dark field. But at what cost, Hank? They're aiming at me. But Grace, Emily, they're the ones who'll pay the price. Hank leaned back in his chair, the wood creaking. You know what my daddy used to say? Fear only grows in the dark. Shine a light on it and it shrinks. You got neighbors standing with you. You got the law sniffing at their heels. Shine the light, Jake. Make the whole town see what's happening. Then the HOA can't hide. His words stuck. Maybe he was right. Maybe it was time to stop being quiet. The next morning, I drove into town and marched straight into the office of the Hawthorne Gazette. The editor, a wiry man named Collins with ink-stained fingers, raised an eyebrow when he saw me. Jake Carter, he said. Heard you've been making headlines of your own lately. I slammed the photos from our trail cams onto his desk. Grainy shots of red cap and gray polo cutting our fence, one of them raising a pistol. Then here's your real headline. The HOA isn't protecting this community. They're terrorizing it. Collins studied the photos, his jaw tightening. This is serious stuff, Carter. You sure you want it printed? Once this goes public, there's no going back. I leaned in. They've already tried to burn my farm. They've already poisoned my cattle. They fired a gun at me in my own field. The only thing left is to tell the truth loud enough that everyone hears it. Collins nodded slowly. Then loud it'll be. The story hit the paper the next morning. Front page. Farmer claims HOA behind violence, arson, and trespassing. My name, my face, my farm. All of it plastered across the town. Some called me a hero for standing my ground. Others called me reckless. But one thing was certain, nobody could ignore us anymore. The HOA held a meeting that night, and the parking lot overflowed with SUVs. I knew because neighbors texted me from inside. Darla herself showed up on crutches, leg bandaged, fire in her eyes. She called me unstable, dangerous, a menace to community safety. But not everyone nodded along this time. Some homeowners murmured dissent. Some asked why the HOA had been at war with a farmer outside their jurisdiction. The cracks were showing. But cracks in their control only made them more desperate. The very next evening, as we sat down to supper, Emily froze. Her fork clattered against the plate. Jake, she whispered, pointing to the window. Outside, parked at the end of our drive, was a black SUV. Its engine idled, headlights off, tinted windows hiding whoever sat inside. My chest tightened. Stay inside, I told Emily. Lock the doors. I grabbed the shotgun and stepped onto the porch. The SUV didn't move. I could feel eyes on me, watching, waiting. I raised the gun high, pumping it once, the sound echoing across the quiet farm. This is private land, I shouted. You're trespassing. Leave now. The SUV revved its engine but didn't move. My finger twitched on the trigger, the weight of the moment pressing down on me. One wrong move and the night would end in blood. And then, slowly, the window rolled down. A man leaned out, face shadowed, but his voice carried clear. You've made a mistake, Carter. You think this is about fences, about gates. But it's bigger, much bigger. and you're standing in the way of something you can't stop. The SUV peeled away, gravel spraying behind it, taillights glowing red like the devil's eyes until they vanished into the night. I stood frozen, shotgun heavy in my hands. Emily came to the door, pale as the moon. "Jake," she whispered. What did he mean? Bigger than fences. I didn't have an answer. Not yet. But deep down, I knew one thing: this wasn't just about an HOA anymore. It was about something darker, something powerful, something willing to burn everything in its path to get what it wanted. And we had just become its biggest obstacle. The words replayed in my head long after the SUV disappeared into the night. It's bigger than fences. You're standing in the way of something you can't stop. I sat on the porch steps until the crickets grew quiet, the shotgun resting across my lap, Emily watching me from the doorway with Grace clutched in her arms. Bigger than fences. Bigger than gates. What could they possibly want with my little farm? The next morning I found out. Margaret Willis, the lawyer I'd hired, called me to her office. Her tone was tight, urgent. "Jake, you'd better sit down for this." She spread a stack of papers across her desk. Zoning maps, development plans, purchase agreements. My stomach dropped as my eyes scanned the bold print at the top of the page. Hawthorne Ridge Resort Project. "What is this?" I asked, my voice low. She tapped the map with her pen. "It's a proposal, half hotel, half golf course, half luxury lakeside homes. Funded by Lakeside Meadows HOA in partnership with a big development company. And guess what's right in the middle of their plans?" My throat tightened. "The farm." She nodded grimly. "Your land is the missing piece. Without it, their project falls apart. That's why they've been escalating. It was never about gates or fences or grass. It's about buying you out, or pushing you out." I clenched my fists until my knuckles cracked. "And killing my cattle? Burning my shed? That was supposed to scare me into selling?" Margaret's eyes were sharp. "Exactly. They've played this game before, Jake, just never this bold. You're standing in the way of millions of dollars. That's why they're willing to risk everything." I sank back in the chair, fury boiling under my skin. "They'll never get this farm. Not while I breathe." Margaret leaned forward. "Then you'd better prepare for the fight of your life. Because they won't quit. And now that your story is in the paper, they'll come harder. But here's the thing: they've already made mistakes. We have photos, threats, witnesses. If we stay calm and gather everything, we can hit them where it hurts most. In court." Her words steadied me, but only for a moment. Because courtrooms moved slow, and the HOA had shown they weren't afraid to play fast. When I returned home, Emily was on the porch with Hank and Tanya, their faces tense. "You're not going to believe this," Emily said, handing me her phone. On the screen was a video posted online, grainy, shaky, clearly taken with a phone. It showed me firing the shotgun that night by the fence. The caption read, "Dangerous farmer shoots at unarmed HOA members." My stomach turned. "They edited it," I growled. "They cut out the part where they fired first." Hank spat into the dirt. "That's propaganda, plain and simple." "But people believe it," Emily whispered. "Look at the comments." And she was right. Some folks called me a lunatic. Others said I was a danger to the community. The HOA's narrative was spreading like wildfire, twisting me into the villain. I slammed the phone down on the porch rail. "Then we tell the truth louder. We release the full footage from our trail cams. We show the world what really happened." And we did. That night, Collins at the Gazette published the uncut videos, showing Red Cap's pistol flashing first, showing the bolt cutters snapping at my fence. It didn't silence everyone, but it sparked doubt. Neighbors who once muttered against me started muttering against the HOA. The cracks in their control widened. But cracks don't stop men with money. They just make them meaner. The next blow came 2 nights later. We were eating supper. Beans and cornbread. Grace humming while Emily tried to keep the mood light, when a thud shook the house. Then another. Glass shattered in the kitchen. Shards raining across the table. Emily screamed. Grace ducked under her chair. I grabbed the shotgun and rushed to the window. A brick lay on the floor, wrapped in paper. Another crashed through the back window, spraying glass into the sink. Outside, I caught the flash of headlights disappearing down the lane. I unwrapped the brick's paper with shaking hands. Scrawled in thick black marker were the words, "Leave or die." Emily pressed Grace against her chest, rocking her as tears streamed down her cheeks. "Jake," she whispered. "They're coming closer. They're coming for us." I clenched the brick until my fingers bled from the glass shards. I looked at my wife, my child, the broken glass sparkling on the floor like ice. And in that moment, something inside me hardened. I wasn't just fighting for land anymore. I was fighting for my family's right to live free of fear. The next morning, I made a decision. I gathered Hank, Tanya, Earl, and every neighbor willing to stand with me. We met in the barn, the smell of smoke still lingering from the fire, and I laid it out plain. They want us gone because we stand in the way of their money. They'll poison, burn, lie, and shoot to break us. But we're not breaking. Not today, not tomorrow, not ever. They want a fight? We'll give them one. Not with hate, but with truth, with unity, and with strength they can't buy. The barn filled with nods, murmurs, the kind of fire that spreads when people are tired of being bullied. But before the words could settle, Grace came running in, breathless, eyes wide. "Daddy!" she cried. "There's more cars. Lots of them. Coming down the road." We rushed outside. Sure enough, a line of SUVs rolled toward the farm, headlights glaring, tires crunching gravel like drums of war. The HOA wasn't hiding anymore. They were coming in the open, bold and many. And as I stood on that porch with my shotgun, neighbors at my side, Emily clutching Grace close, I knew the war had reached its breaking point. The battle for the farm, the battle for our family's very survival, was about to explode. The convoy of SUVs rolled down my gravel drive like a slow-moving storm. Headlights glared, tires spat rocks, and engines growled low like beasts hungry for a fight. There were at least 7 of them, each identical, black, shiny, tinted. They didn't come sneaking in the shadows this time. They came bold, like an army marching into enemy land. Grace clutched Emily's leg, her little voice shaking. "Mommy, are they here to hurt us?" Emily pressed her close, whispering, "Not while Daddy's here." I stood on the porch, shotgun resting across my chest, heart pounding like a war drum. Hank was beside me with his old rifle. Tanya's boy gripping a bat so tight his knuckles were white. Earl leaned against his truck, eyes squinting, his hound growling low. Behind me, neighbors filled the yard, their faces hard with resolve. The SUVs stopped in a row just beyond the gate. For a long moment, the engines idled, rumbling like thunder caught in the ground. Then the doors opened, one after another, and out stepped men and women in business clothes. HOA board members, polished and smug, standing on my dirt like they owned it. In the middle of them, leaning on crutches, was Darla. Her bandaged leg peeked from beneath a pressed skirt, her hair perfect despite everything. Her eyes locked on me, burning with fury. Beside her was Thomas Kearns, the lawyer, carrying his briefcase like a weapon. He raised his voice, smooth as oil. "Jake Carter," he called. "You are hereby trespassing on land claimed by Lakeside Meadows Homeowners Association. This property will be seized under eminent domain for the development of Hawthorne Ridge Resort. You and your family are ordered to vacate immediately." A bitter laugh tore from my throat. "Trespassing? This land's been mine for 10 years. You don't own a grain of this soil." Murmurs rose among the neighbors. Tanya shouted, "We've seen your men cutting his fence at night. We've seen your guns." Earl added, "You burned his barn and poisoned his cattle." Darla slammed her crutch down, her voice shrill. "Lies. He's the danger here. He shot me. He's armed and unstable." I stepped forward, holding the shotgun low but visible. My voice carried across the field. "You came to my land. You threatened my wife. You terrified my daughter. You fired first. And still, I didn't kill you. If I wanted you gone, you wouldn't be standing here. But I'll tell you this, I'm done running. I'm done watching you hurt what's mine." Kearns smirked, snapping open his briefcase. "Your defiance will cost you everything, Mr. Carter. We have influence. We have lawyers. We have power." Before I could answer, another voice cut through the air. "And you've got charges." Every head turned. Sheriff Daniels' cruiser pulled into the drive, lights flashing red and blue. He stepped out, flanked by deputies. In his hand was a folder thick with papers. "You," Daniels barked, pointing at red cap and gray polo standing near Darla. "Arrest them. Charges: armed trespassing, vandalism, attempted arson, assault with a deadly weapon." Deputies swarmed, cuffing the 2 men as they sputtered protests. Darla shrieked, "This is outrageous. They were acting on behalf of the HOA." Daniels' eyes narrowed. "Then maybe the HOA can explain this." He held up a trail cam photo, clear as daylight, showing Red Cap raising his pistol on my land. Then another showing gray polo with bolt cutters at my fence. Then the letter, "Leave or die." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Some HOA members shifted uneasily, eyes darting between Darla and Kearns. Daniels raised his voice. "The evidence is undeniable. This farmer and his family have been victims, not aggressors. And I'll see to it that every threat, every fire, every poisoned cow gets its day in court." Kearns' smirk faltered. Darla's face drained of color. Neighbors erupted in cheers. Hank clapped my back so hard my ribs ached. Tanya raised her fist. Earl hollered, "Justice at last." Emily wept silently, clutching Grace, both of them shaking with relief. Grace whispered, "Daddy, are we safe now?" I knelt, kissed her forehead. "We are, baby girl. We are." Darla tried to shout again, but the deputies pulled her back. her voice lost under the sound of victory swelling in the yard. For the first time in weeks, the fear that had hung over us like a storm cloud began to lift. But as the HOA members retreated, I caught Kern's eyes. He leaned close to Darla and muttered something I couldn't hear, but his gaze locked on me with a promise. This battle was won, but the war with greed was far from over. When the SUVs finally rolled away, and the blue lights dimmed, the farm was quiet again. The barn still bore its scars, the field still missed the cows we'd lost, and the fear still lingered in the corners of our minds. But we were standing. We were still here. That night we gathered on the porch. Neighbors laughed, shared food, told stories under the stars. Grace drew chalk hearts across the driveway, her laughter carrying into the dark. Emily leaned against me, her hand warm in mine, and as I looked across the farm, the fences holding, the barn glowing in the moonlight, the people who refused to let us stand alone, I felt something stronger than fear. Hope, because fences might mark land. But kindness, courage, and community, that's what makes it home. And no HOA, no lawyer, no fire, no gun could ever take that away from us. Where are you watching from?